Hello, my name is John Williams, and one of my hobbies is to create fine art avian photography from my photographs I take out on a marsh refuge that's below my house. And here is a finished product of two white-faced ibises after I've done my post-processing. And I try to use some of the examples of contemporary wildlife artists as far as color combinations and composition, etc., to make my photographs more painterly. I get a little tired of just seeing pictures of birds. I wanted them to be more of an artistic statement. So the original photograph, I'll turn off some of my processes here to get back to the original, is, see one more, is this image here. Now I did make white balance adjustments in Lightroom, which is where I store my photographs. And I also converted this to a TIFF by running it through, usually my workflow, I run the DNG files, which is like a raw file. I run it through Nick software and I make adjustments at about 10% on saturation. It's called brilliance and warmth, and a few of the different tools in Nick software's color effects program. And that converts it to a TIFF as well. And then I move the TIFF into Photoshop. Now I cropped, this is not, this was plenty close. I did not need to crop to get closer, but I cropped to create a kind of balance in the image. And I did that in Lightroom, but I could have done it in Photoshop as well. But it was I was plenty close on the image. I just wanted, and this is a random ratio aspect. When I print these, I will just cut out this size and I make everything, my mounts, and I even do encaustic on my work. But when I do that, I will just use this random size. I won't need a standard aspect ratio. But I usually duplicate, and the reason why, even though you don't have to duplicate, you can make your changes by clicking and just naming the piece. I duplicate it because sometimes I use multiple images and run them through different plugins. So it was just handy to have multiple images. And then I found a texture that I had, which is a kind of, this is it's kind of greenish, and I'm kind of borrowing from the green in the coats a little bit. I just lean towards green a little bit because there is green in their multicolored coats of these white-faced ibises, and of course there's reds and browns and different colors, and there was green in the spring and that kind of thing, so I thought that would work. Now I'm going to turn off the mask just to show you the way you turn off your mask is that you hit Shift and then click on the mask. And then that's your texture there. And I did not alter this texture, I just left it the way it is. Now, once I hit Shift and click back on it, there's my mask. Now, if I hit Option and click on the mask, you'll see the mask. So the way I created this mask, I can do selections in any way that seems easiest for me. So I can use channels, watch my cursor, and I'll go up there to channels, and I can click on that and make selections with that. I'm going to move my cursor across and up here, and I can hit on that little tool and do a quick selection. But in this case, I just painted it in because the birds are not really that complex. And I've gotten good at painting in. Let me get closer to you to this. I've got fairly good at knowing how to use the opacity to bring out little feather lines here. And I did not want to make these at 100%. I wanted to make them at 70%. I wanted to give a little bit of a soft feel to it. So these, you'll see these are not painted in with the black. So you click your X to switch to the black right here where my cursor is. That's your selection of the color you're going to brush with. And of course on a white mask, you're going to want to paint black to mask out the green texture. But as I said, I just painted my selection in. I didn't, and I painted it at 70% opacity, and then I lower the opacity to get the feather lines and the fine detail. And then on my reflection, I was way down there to like 5% at first, and then maybe some of it is 10%, and then the grass is really low opacity. And the way you select your opacity is, let's see, I'll hit the feather tool. Now, if you look up here at my cursor, you will see I'm at 80% opacity. And so if you just hit the number 2, you go to 20%, and 1 at 10%. So you can keep hitting these numbers up here on top of the numbers on your keyboard, and go up to 100% by hitting the 0 to adjust your opacity. And I left my flow at 100%. This is what you want to watch, is that if you're going to line a selection, very seldom do you want to be at total softness of your brush. You want your brush to be at, right in there somewhere, 37%, because otherwise it will bleed over too much. But you can control that. If you, like I'll show you my other trick here where I use completely soft brush. And that is this way of doing things. I'll go to 5%, and then I will just brush over an area, a general area, which I will come back and remove some of it. But I brush over a general area at 5%. That's 5% out of 100%. So that's really soft. But it begins to give you slight definition in these areas around, so you can just bring your image sort of out of the texture a little bit so it stands out from it. So now let's go Option and back. So you'll see that I kind of softly brought them out. Then I kind of added a little more right in here and that. I'm just playing around with opacities. And then these are like at 70%. They're not at 100%. I didn't want to make them super pop. Let's get closer here to show. So you see, I've got feather line here. Yeah, it's a little softer, but I wanted it to blend in a little bit. But I got it, the definition. And then I just use a very small brush to get the bills. So that's how I got the initial mask here. Now let's go up to this one. Now on this one, I used an adjustment layer. That was a curves layer on this to make my texture stand out a little bit. Oh no, I think I lightened. This was a little dark right in here on this ibis. So I wanted to lighten it, so at that point I just used an adjustment layer. Now I want to show you a little something about this. See where I move from here? That's my adjustment layer. That's my mask that made this lighter. I invert. What I do is I make my adjustment here slightly lighter, Then I put a mask on it. Then I hit this and invert the mask to black, which covers everything back the way it was. And then I paint out at a lower opacity until I get the kind of balance between these two birds that I wanted as far as lightness. Here's an interesting tool that I found out. If you click on the adjustment layer dot on your curve, you can hit your arrow key and go up slightly. And just by and so I just slightly lighten that, and that's fine with me. So that was what I did, is to make this a little as light as this. I added an adjustment layer. Then I decided to add another texture. And so at that point, and I do make adjustments on my mask as I go along if it doesn't look right. But this added color I didn't want necessarily, but it gave me additional texture. And so then I will take, the way you do this is when you move, if you want to slide your mask up, you hold the Option key down, click on your mask and hold it and slide it up, and you duplicate. By hitting Option and sliding a mask up, you can duplicate that mask at this point. So I did that because I wanted the image of these not to be totally covered by my mask. And my mask, when you go up here on your mask, you'll see I'm at normal blending mode. So there's all your blending modes. But I just decided after trying different blending modes that I wanted this new texture to be at that blending mode. Then I decided that I wanted to bring out more of that texture, so I used a adjustment layer in the curves, and you see my curve is down darker. So I wanted to bring out some of the darker detail on this sort of beige colored texture. And so I did that, and then I only wanted to do it to the texture. So I used a clipping mask, and that little arrow you see there is the clipping mask. And the way you create that is, I'm going to take the clipping mask off by pushing down Option at this little corner between the two layers and clip it. And then that totally changes it because I'm making my curves adjustment to the whole image. Now if I click Option and click again at this little corner, I get back to where I was, and I'm only making the curves adjustment on the second mask, the beige mask. Then I wanted to make that mask black and white. So I added an adjustment layer there, which I lost my clipping mask on it, so it's made the whole image black. But if I go like this, hit Option and hit that corner, then I'm back to where I was, and the only thing that's rendered black and white is this beige. I'll go back to the beige color so you can see it. Is this beige second texture that I added on top of the first texture. So I made it more pronounced by curves, and I turned it black and white by the black and white adjustment layer, clipping mask to the beige. Now another thing to notice about the mask, about this texture, the beige texture, is if you go up here, the opacity is only at 26%. I didn't want but just a slight change in texture here. I just wanted to add to the complexity of the texture, so I reduced the opacity to 26%. The way I usually do that is by putting my cursor on the word opacity and clicking it and dragging left or right. So in this case, I'm back to 26%. And so this mask at 20, this texture at 26%, the green texture at 100%. Both of them, the green is at normal blending mode, and this is at normal blending mode. And then the two adjustment layers to the beige one. Then I decided to add a final mask to add even more texture, and maybe some texture across the birds as well, because I wanted to add that sort of unifying texture that creates a kind of texture on everything. So that's the final one, and it darkened it. So let's remove the other ones to see the and go back up here to, oh, let's see. Well, I may have to take those off. Why is that not showing? Oh, must have something to do with the blending mode here. I'm not sure. On this one, I'm at 21% opacity, so that's why it didn't show up. So let's go. So if I go back up to 100%, I actually kind of looked at that texture at 100% because this has a kind of patterned texture, and I like the brown in the texture because it complemented the brown in here, but it was obviously way too heavy. So then my thinking, and I put it in vivid light. The blending mode here is in vivid light because it made it more vivid. But whenever I get something that has what I want, but way too much of it, I don't think it's horrible. I just reduce the opacity. So I think that was way down to 21%. And, you know, I kind of even like it maybe at 27%. But at 27% now, if I go close, see, you can see in here some of that textural pattern. And this also had like a wood grain to it that went vertically up and down, which I wanted to just add a suggestion of it. And then some of that brown got left in here, in the color here. And you see on the birds now, if I get even closer, they've got texture on them. So the reason for this last texture was to kind of have a unifying effect on the whole image. And so that was my decision making, but not real heavy, just subtly. Maybe I'll go back down here to about 24. So that's the whole process. And in what I do, I've already saved this image before, but if you watch my cursor, I'm going up here to this little spot right here called Actions. But at the bottom, connected to my Actions palette, is my History palette. And what I will do when I've done work like this is I hit this little camera, and it takes a picture of everything I've done and saves it, because if you get too far in to your workflow, it will start deleting some of the stuff. So as you see here, I've got different stages where I've taken a snapshot. The first one, the second one, the third one, and I've lost, because I started in the middle here, I've lost some of the other adjustments. Like I did a levels adjustment on this, which I saved, but I'm not worried about that right now. But I've done that. So then when I go like this, and I may just decide to flatten the image. So flatten my image. You go down here, that's your layers selection. You go down here, and I can either merge visible or flatten. Sometimes I flatten an image because if I have added things from other sources in my files, it might end up, if I just go up here to save it and hit save, it might save it to the wrong file. I wanted to go back to where my original IBIS was that I took out of Nick Software in Lightroom. So I'm sending it back to Lightroom as a PSD file, because everything that comes out of Photoshop, usually, unless you change it, ends up with a PSD file. And I didn't want to do save as, I just wanted to come up here and just click save and save it back to where it came from as a PSD file. So I had done that. Then I move it around in Lightroom and create TIFFs and JPEGs as I need. Usually I will make something in Lightroom a TIFF if I'm going to print it on my printer. On the internet, obviously, if I'm thinking of posting on the internet, I save it as a JPEG. I like to have the original PSD file coming out of Lightroom to save that so that I can make changes and create new files from that original. So that's it on some ideas. I know some of this you may have missed some of it, but it gives you a basic idea of a workflow. I like to learn from seeing somebody's workflow, not from hearing them tell me about things. So that's my workflow. I hope it's helped. And now if I can only find where to log off.